All right, welcome back to another edition of the Franklin Community High School Career Exploration Project. And I am joined today. I've interviewed a lot of different people for this, and I will honestly say that this is probably my favorite person that I've interviewed. I would say she is the person I have, trying to remember, maybe known the longest. I don't know. Definitely the prettiest person that I have ever interviewed. This is the Continuing Legal Education Director for the Indiana State Bar Association, Kristin Owens. Kristin, welcome.
Thank you. I would say you would know your uncle longer than me.
Oh, yeah. And a couple of people who I interviewed at the beginning. But, I got to wait a little bit to interview you. So So Continuing Legal Education Director, that is a mouthful. Why don't you tell me what it is that you do?
Okay. Well, you can call me the CLE Director. That's a little bit easier. So what I do is I work for the Bar Association, which is a voluntary organization for attorneys in the state of Indiana. Each attorney has to fulfill so many continuing legal education requirements to keep their license in the state of Indiana. So I help administrate all of our programs at the state, report the attorneys' attendance, make sure they're in compliance. The state actually runs the program. We're a sponsor, a provider. So we provide programs for attorneys, report their attendance, request credit. I'm just kind of handle all the logistics of our education program.
I gotcha. So how, as far as your education and your training, what have you had education-wise and training-wise, and what are some jobs that you've had that have led you to this?
I've had a lot of jobs. So I went to Franklin College and I got a sociology
degree. So did I.
Yeah.
So weird.
That's weird. If only I would have known you then. So I got a sociology degree, which, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with that. And I started kind of working in nonprofits and managing volunteers. I worked for the Girl Scouts. I worked for St. Francis Hospital. And once I left, did a small stint in hospice where I managed volunteers. And along the way, I worked for an association, Society of Broadcast Engineers, where I first got my start kind of in the association world and did education programs for the broadcast engineers, and just found that I really liked managing volunteers on that level. It's a higher level. It's kind of like a loose project management, I guess. You're just kind of planning many programs, events. It worked well because I was able to work with people, be detail-oriented, but not so much that I screwed it up, I guess, because I'm not very detail-oriented. So I just kind of took a long way to get here. I've been here almost 4 years now. And so basically just kind of started in nonprofits and found my way and finally found a position that kind of fits all my skill sets. And I have a great leader and a great boss. So that really helps.
What kind of led you, I guess, to the area of nonprofits or anything like that? Was it something you always wanted to help people, or was it just your first job you got out of college and that kind of kept you in it?
Kind of a little bit of both. So I was a sociology major with a social work track, since Franklin College doesn't have like an actual accredited social work program. So, you've been married to me 5 years now. I love being around people. I genuinely enjoy helping people. It's just kind of, I've always been that way. I talk a lot, so it just kind of comes naturally. And through Franklin College, I also had a nonprofit management minor. So we kind of did some work, some internships and things like that in nonprofit. So I knew somebody who worked at Girl Scouts. She said, you should apply for this job. I think you'd be good at it. It's managing volunteers, working with people. And I said, that sounds like something I could at least handle. I never was a Girl Scout. I actually dropped out after one meeting. So I got my foot in the door. And once you kind of get into the nonprofit world, I think in Indianapolis, it's a small little world and you make some connections, and one connection leads to the next and the next. And then you just kind of find yourself almost 20 years into the nonprofit. Associations are actually nonprofits as well. So I've just never really left that little bubble.
Yeah. Now, you obviously like your job that you're in right now. But there are obviously cons to every job. It doesn't matter how much you like it. So what are some of the things you like and some of the things you don't like? Not even necessarily about your job, but maybe working in nonprofit or working with volunteers.
Yeah. I guess working with volunteers, more so in my previous jobs, is sometimes it's kind of like herding cats, because it is your full-time job, but you're just trying to get people who have other commitments, have full-time jobs. So the things you want them to do are not necessarily their priority, but it's your priority. So just kind of keeping that motivation, and oftentimes having to pick up, I guess, slack, for the lack of a better word. When a volunteer doesn't show up for a shift, that means you're working the shift. So when I worked in hospice, there was a lot of times that I sat with patients, which actually worked out really well, and I loved it. So you just have to be prepared to wear a lot of different hats. So sometimes that can be a con, just because you may have a million other things to do, but if a volunteer doesn't show up for something, that's what you're going to be doing. With this job, it's a little bit different because it's bigger picture. The thing I enjoy the most is probably just being able to have the creativity to plan a lot of things and just get to use a lot of brainstorming and ideas. But at the end of the day, you're also trying to get people who have very busy full-time jobs being lawyers to, turn in materials to speak. So things like that. So I think just probably having to kind of keep up on people is probably my least favorite thing.
Just trusting that people are going to show up when they say they're going to and do what they're going to do.
That they're going to read your emails, that you send them 500 times. Yes, that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, at least in the role you're in right now, like, you get to work with attorneys, and attorneys are well known for their attention to detail and just overall promptness. So that's probably definitely something that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm sure the attorney you interviewed spoke highly of how they follow deadlines really well.
So with the job you have right now, obviously you're successful in it, and you're around people who are good, and you've probably been around people who aren't so good in these certain situations. What type of personality do you think would be successful in this, and what type of person and personality would maybe struggle in the role in nonprofit or volunteering?
I think if you're working in a nonprofit, you need to be flexible. You need to be able to kind of just go with the flow. Use all the buzzwords that you learned in the pandemic: pivot, flexible, all those things, because nothing ever really goes the way you want it to plan. Fluid. Yeah, it's always fluid. Plans are always fluid. You're oftentimes working on very little budgets. Nonprofits really aren't. There's a reason they're not profits. They don't usually make a lot of money, and they're not in it to make money. So if you are someone who has to know what's going to happen, like when you go into work on Monday and you need to know how your week is going to go, you probably aren't going to like nonprofits, or you're not going to like volunteer management, because it could change at any given moment, which is, I think, why it's worked out well for me, because sometimes I am not the most plan-oriented person. So I kind of like that, the flexibility. I kind of like that sometimes you're flying by the seat of your pants, that each day is different. You may start on a Monday with a to-do list, and by noon it's already shot for the whole week because other things have come up. So you have to just be able to think on your toes. Creative problem solver is probably really good if you're working in nonprofits, because a lot of times what you're trying to do is talk other people into doing what you want them to do, but you're also not paying those people to do what you want. So you have to be very creative on reaching your goal, I guess.
Okay. Now, how has your job changed since the whole pandemic started?
So we've actually gotten a lot busier. Before the pandemic, attorneys could only get certain hours, what we call distance learning. So, via webinar, anything that happened not in person. And they were only allowed a certain amount of hours of that. And once the pandemic hit, that restriction lifted. So we have been doing a ton of programs on Zoom. I have three lunchtime programs this week, actually. So we started an on-demand library of webinars where we have seen over 10,000 people view our webinars. We've probably done over 400 programs since last March. And before that, we had probably 20 programs on our on-demand library. Like I said, now we're over 100 plus 400 just in general. So it's actually, I guess, been really good for us as far as being able to think outside the box and how to meet lawyers where they're at. They really like the lunchtime CLEs. They like doing things on Zoom. It just is easier with their schedule. So we're just learning a lot about what, as you guys are in the education world, like what you can do online and what learning is beneficial then versus when we come in person, being a little bit more intentional about that, not just having a meeting to have a meeting when you can easily do it on a 30-minute Zoom. So we're a statewide organization, so it's easier also to like serve all our members because we can get a Zoom education program and meet someone that's in Mishawaka, as opposed to if they wouldn't have been able to drive down to Indy for it.
Yeah. Okay. And now, as far as, I'm assuming you work from home now. I'm guessing probably like 4 days a week. Maybe Tuesdays seem like a good day to go in the office.
Yep, I am home remotely. We just started going back into the office 1 day a week in September. So, and we're going to downsize our office. We've restructured our whole plan of how we're going to work moving forward. No offices, more open space for training and programs. So yeah, it's completely changed the way we work.
Yeah. And just being home, like if you have animals or something, I'm sure that really is good for you.
Oh yes. I love spending the day with all 3 dogs, especially your favorite, Murphy.
Okay. Last question for you, Kristin. Basically, if you could give any kind of advice to high school students, just general advice, not even career, anything like that, what would it be?
Probably to go out and volunteer, internships, just try a bunch of different things. I was someone who went into my freshman year having no idea what I wanted to do. I picked sociology because it was the study of people. So I kind of just hoped in 4 years I would figure out what I wanted to do with that. And I still didn't. So I think just trying a bunch of different things, not being afraid to go out of your comfort zone. When I took that small job or that small stint in hospice, like I had never worked in that field at all. It was great experience, great learning. I found that I definitely did not want to be a medical provider though, like a nurse. So I would say just try a bunch of different things and eventually you'll kind of land into something you like.
Yeah, just taking advantage of the opportunities that are in front of you and that are out there. That's very good advice. You are quite wise.
Yeah. I will also say those connections that you make along the way will also help you. I think I've had, like I said, maybe what I mentioned, 6 jobs since graduating college, and only one of those I got without knowing someone, was just a cold applying for a job. So
networking and meeting people and stuff.
Yeah. All that small talk.
That's great. All right. Once again, Kristin Owens, Continuing Legal Education Director with the Indiana State Bar Association. Thank you so much for your time here today. You could have been spending it doing a million other things, but you're talking to me, and I appreciate it.
Story of my life.
Well, thank you.